Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 121 of the Citrix session. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. Today is November 21st, 2022. You guys remember year 2000, how that seemed like yesterday?
I do. I do. The world was coming to an end, in fact, but it didn't, as it turns out.
Yeah.
Everything bad was going to happen on that New Year's Eve. And we had family tickets to go down to Disney World to celebrate the millennium. And I, of course, being in IT, was told probably sometime in September that nope, you're going to be in the data center in the IT offices all weekend, because in case something goes wrong. And nothing went wrong, but
Did nothing go wrong, Todd, because it was never going to go wrong, or was all the relative coding of dates fixed in firmware and BIOS and applications and operating systems?
So for the newer hardware and the newer operating systems and applications, we were pretty confident that we were going to handle the date turnover. But we also had a couple of AS400s and a couple of mainframes that we weren't exactly positive what was going to happen. So we had contingency plans laid out pretty in depth. But we did have a situation where in November, leading up to that, someone realized that we didn't have a generator to power our data center that was available. So we did a fairly expensive generator purchase and installation a week before Y2K. So we had some electricians that had a very happy Christmas. We also had a couple of generator sales guys that were celebrating with brand new cars. I'll put it that way. Not that price gouging occurred, but it did.
I want to talk about that too, but what do any of you guys know an organization that had a massive impact, any kind of major impact by Y2K?
Nope. No. I just wanted power, and I didn't want airplanes dropping out of the sky. I mean, that was what everyone was worried about.
A couple things. One, I want to say that I got a friend of mine that had a staffing business for the couple years leading up to it. He still does, but he's loaded now because of Y2K. I mean, he literally made a fortune off Y2K and staffing up to address it.
Yeah. I worked for a company that was a Y2K company, and 65% of the revenue went away in the first quarter of 2000 because of that's how much we were making in the years prior to it.
Yeah. Well, I want to tie that back to what we're still talking about, which is digital workspaces, and specifically Citrix DaaS, Citrix CVAD 2209 and Citrix DaaS, which is always the latest. Did I say that right?
Yep.
Yes.
I was on a planes, trains, and automobiles and buses tour last week. Charlotte, Raleigh, Minneapolis, Charlotte, Greenville, South Carolina. And 3 times last week it came up, hey, pandemic happened. What did you change, Mr. Customer, Mr. XenTegra guy who knows it all? And I was like, well, we didn't change anything. We already worked this way. And it was funny to watch the customer kind of backtrack out of how bad it was to, oh yeah, we were all prepared too. And I'm like, oh, 5 minutes ago, you said you just bought 9,000 new laptops before, during, and after the pandemic to address it. Sounds like you had some big changes. And that's why it's important that we have this conversation today and continue. This is part 4. If I didn't already say that, maybe going to take us 1 or 2 more to get through all the updates. But that's why it's important that we have these conversations and we get prepared, because I don't know what's coming next, but something's coming next. You guys running those conversations still?
Maybe. Yeah. We still do. It's a little bit different now, right? I think not as impactful. I mean, I don't know that we've seen something like that in 20 years, right? But here we are. The conversation I keep having is whatever it is that we did, we got to find something new to do. So I think most customers, it was a VPN, it was something, but I don't, how many of these these types of events that are so impactful to a business are we going to see in our lifetime, you know?
Well, and I wasn't saying, another pandemic. I was saying just something's coming, a snowstorm, a hurricane, your kid's sick, a doctor's appointment that you can't move kind of stuff. Something's coming.
Yeah, Buffalo got 6.5 feet of snow. There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
That was nuts.
So one of the little trivial things I point to all the time, and I'm assuming this is going to work, but this login, this employee login button right here on the Citrix webpage, that's been there since I started working there in 2009, which means if I'm an employee, I've always known how to get into the system just by going to my own website if I was looking around. That is a huge statement from my perspective, because that really shows that at Citrix World, you eat your own dog food. I don't know about you guys, but when I worked there 09 to 12/13, for the first 3 weeks, I didn't have a company-owned device, and I was working, no problem. And that was 2009. Stuff goes back at least to then and way beyond that.
Hey, Andy, can I tell you a little secret? Is at Citrix, I've never owned, and I've been here 10 years, a company-owned device.
Yeah. Well, then that leads me to my whole other conversation. I don't actually believe in BYOD. I believe in BYOD, but I have a problem with it from a security perspective, unless you're all in. If you're all in on delivering the workloads like we're talking about in the Citrix world, whether it's SaaS or whether it's x86 legacy Windows desktop, or at that point you can truly do BYOD. But that's the other part of the conversation. In those conversations last week, they all had just made millions of dollars in purchases of laptops and put VPNs on it. Mm-hmm. And I just about lost my mind. I can't believe people are still doing that. But I think, Geremy, you said it a minute ago, the pandemic happened and most people did it then and continue to do it. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're just enabling an entire bot army to attack their environment by doing that, are they not?
Well, they are. And there's a slide I like to bring up when we honestly have these secure private access conversations. So I know it's been a while since we've talked about that technology, but the idea that, historically folks would deliver a web or SaaS app through maybe a published browser, that's fine. Well, secure private access does that with a local browser, which by the way is built into Workspace app these days. And the idea is it's a local browser that's secure, that renders it locally, right? But is that the right solution all the time? So the slide I bring up talks about the different tier of device, whether it's a purely BYOD device, whether it's a BYOD device with some sort of posture checking, or whether it's corporate issued, or if it's a completely locked down corporate device. So I think, we tier our devices, we tier our data, and honestly, you have to match the technology to the business requirement, right? And so, it's pretty interesting now that we have Citrix DaaS and we're delivering virtual apps with secure private access, where we're delivering web and SaaS apps from a local, a locally installed application. And does it make sense to do that? You have to factor in, things like data sovereignty, just data importance, right? Is this public data or is this something that's completely internal, like IP? But to your point, I think a lot of organizations that I've talked to, they've kind of just put one solution in front of all of it, and that's not always the right solution.
And twice out of 2 out of the 3 times last week, I think they put that solution in front of, because they wanted to give that shiny new laptop to that employee as a token of being a great employee. Which, by the way, 3 or 4 years ago, that was a shiny new tablet. Now it's back to a laptop. Mm-hmm. And it's just constant chasing of the physical device on the endpoint, not the solution that brings it all to fruition.
I do love a good new endpoint, though. I love just opening the box. Just the smell of the new technology. That never gets old.
Yeah, and I think, Andy, the other thing that we're dealing with is 30 plus years of an established process, an established routine of how to get a laptop out to an employee. The imaging process, the loading the applications on there, and things like that. I mean, there's some companies that have entire departments full of folks that they do that, or they've their laptop vendor offers that as a pre-configuration service. The inertia associated with laptop distribution and fleet management is kind of hard to overcome, especially if you're comparing it to something that's fairly new. And I'll use quotation figures on the newness piece of it, because Citrix has been around for almost that same amount of time with 30 years of delivering applications out to the users. But I think Geremy brought up an interesting point around the data.
Hey, Todd, real quick, before you go there, can I say this real quick? So growing up, I wanted to be the guy that owned a car dealership because I wanted to drive a new car every month.
Yep.
Well, now I'm a guy that has a company that sells hardware, software, services, solutions, and I get a new laptop every month. So it's not quite the same, but I still get excited when I come home and Amazon Claus has brought me a new laptop, or a vendor has sent me a new laptop or a tablet or what have you. It happens like literally almost once a week now. So I get it, right? I get why but I want to be clear that the thing that I'm not upset about them getting an awesome laptop. I mean, $3,000 for one seems like a bit high. Sometimes I get like a $300 one at home, and I'm just as excited about that because I'm going to go, log into a cloud desktop of some type. What I'm anti is that VPN thing that they put on it.
Yep.
Now you're going to talk about data.
Yeah. So the interesting part about the data component of it is, what we've seen over the past 5 to 10 years is that the employees and users don't really care about the hardware. They don't care about the applications, but they do care about the data. The data needs to be available, reliable, and also they need to be able to work with it. And they don't care what tool they have to use. If they're using Microsoft Office, they're using G Suite, or they're using any of the other tools that are out there to manipulate the data, they're gonna migrate to what they're familiar with and what they're comfortable using, and not have to worry about that. And the same thing goes with the hardware platform. If they're a Mac user, that's fine. If they're a Windows or a Chrome user, that's fine as well. What they really want to be able to do, the important part of their job, is defined by what they can do with the data and what the outcomes are that they can deliver with manipulating that data.
Well, it's certainly the part that should matter.
Yeah.
However, every time I go to my son's room and I touch that 5-year-old Mac that I gave him because I didn't want anymore, I'm like, oh, it's such a beautiful piece of hardware. It's so nice.
Yep. But interesting when you said you get when Amazon Claus dropped off the latest version of hardware to you. Imagine if you had to go through and update every single and install every single application that you needed to do, right? You're used to using that hardware that's constantly being refreshed by connecting it to something that you're already familiar with, that follows you regardless of what piece of hardware you're on. And that, whether that be a set of applications, your profile, or your virtual desktop or your virtualized applications.
Yeah, when it comes to
you would have a much different experience.
Yeah, I don't have to worry about it. No, I will tell you, I get one of these new phones every year or so, or every time my kids lose one and I'd give them mine and take theirs, the new one. And as easy as they've made it, I just have so much on this thing that for the next 3 weeks, I go, oh, I forgot about that. Or I can't open my garage door. I can't get into my house. And it's easy, but it's still inconvenient.
I'd like to figure out how you get the new phone, because my kids, they get the new phone and I get their piece of crap.
Yeah, we should talk about that.
Hey, call. Todd, you gotta set some expectations. You're the man of the house.
Yeah,
that works.
So that was Geremy Meyers and Todd Smith, both directors of sales engineering for Citrix. And we also had Bill, who's been patiently quiet, Bill Sutton, on the XenTegra side. Bill, how's it going?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm not asleep. Yeah, I've just been patiently listening and agreeing with most of what's been said. It's good to be here.
What did we say wrong? What would you clear?
Okay.
Oh, I don't know. You didn't say anything wrong. But I pretty much agree with almost everything. I think that to Todd's point, and this kind of goes along with what he was just saying. I got a new laptop a month ago or so, and I spent it took me at least 2 to 3 weeks to get it to where I'm used to it. So I ended up using, which I do from time to time, I used a virtual desktop a lot because the virtual desktop had everything I needed already in it, right? So I kind of invalidated his point. So I guess maybe I would agree with just about all, but I can't think of what I wouldn't agree with. I don't remember, but there was a couple of things said.
Yeah. Well, over this weekend, let's see, my wife has her personal laptop, which I use sometimes to get into work. And then my mother-in-law, oh my goodness, my mother-in-law brings, a week or so ago, she brings her laptop and she says, some lady from Microsoft's talking. And sure enough, someone was she'd open it up and go to a website and somebody would talk to her about, please don't turn your computer off. Microsoft, we're in the background fixing it. True story. So I had to wipe that one. And then she came over this weekend. I had to, give it to her redone with no admin rights this time. I don't know how the rest of the world does it.
I don't either. Yeah.
And had I had time, I'd have put Google on it and made it a Chromebook for her, but I didn't have time. Let's see. I have so many things I want to talk about. Trying to go back to last week's. Okay, I can't remember. There was something really important about last week's conversations I wanted to bring up that we're just. Oh, I know what it was. Hey, Todd, do you think most people think of Citrix and they think of published apps to this day is what Citrix is?
I think to a certain extent, you're right. There's certainly a lot of legacy customers that still think of us in the context of delivering applications to delivering Windows apps to a non-Windows endpoint, or allowing people to work from home. Those are the two biggest use cases, and that's the 30-year history that we have. And they don't always understand, and they haven't had the updates or heard from either Citrix or partners about what we're doing that's new.
So that's what I was getting to for last week. I had those conversations, and every time I would try to talk about, digital workspace and single sign-on and access to SaaS and all these different, things, analytics, and I could not get the 3 customers that were stuck in the ditch to stop thinking Citrix was published apps, to the point where they use Citrix as a verb.
Yep.
How long were they using Citrix, Andy? Like, what's their history with the product?
So 2 of the 3 folks brought up OS2 and South Florida related. I grew up in South Florida. OS2 WinFrame came out of their mouths. And which, by the way, if you're meeting with me and you start the conversation with WinFrame or MetaFrame, you're already losing points, because that means you don't know the latest stuff. If you're just trying to tie the conversation back to 25 years ago, I already start to dismiss what you don't know, because you're trying to use the old guy card on me, and I don't care about the old guy card.
If they were talking to OS2, they were probably talking about WinView back in the day.
Ooh.
Yeah, WinView,
which was my first introduction to Citrix as a delivery mechanism.
Yeah,
we get a lot of customers who've been doing it since. We'll name drop MetaFrame, right? They've been doing it for years, and that was the initial use case. That was the only use case, right? Published desktops, published apps, right? Zen Desktop was not a technology until 2008, 2009-ish. Todd,
Yep.
You probably know. Yeah. But since then, we kind of have a generation of IT administrators who don't know that model, right? So everything is VDI, and when we talk about published apps, they would say, "Is that a thing?" Believe it or not. So we're starting to see a pretty good mix.
Yeah, I've run into customers that were newer to the technology within the past 3 to 5 years that see it as a VDI play. It's VDI, it's VDI, it's VDI, and we be in design discussions with them, and they'll say, "Well, we have this one app we really want to deliver kind of separately. So can we create a separate? Well, you can do that as a published app via on a multi-user operating system. Oh, you can do that? Really? Citrix can do that?" Well, yeah, they've been doing that since the beginning practically, but yeah, so I've seen it the opposite, where the beginning is VDI, and this is mostly for folks that are new to the technology in the past few years.
But you know what? There's a legacy here, Bill, and Andy have seen several of these customers as well, where they use Citrix for virtual apps and they use VMware for virtual desktops.
Oh, yeah.
Why? Well, because VMware first served up desktops and Citrix did apps. It just kind of made sense. And I think there are plenty of customers where that legacy still exists, because that's just kind of how it's always been done.
Well, it's kind of like people always see VMware for server virtualization, because that's what it was magical. That's what it did. You always see Cadillac as your grandfather's car because that's what you associate him with.
I had a customer. So I had a customer years ago in New England that they actually used Citrix to publish out the VMware client. So they would log into their Citrix virtual app to connect into their VMware virtual desktop.
Yeah, I've seen that too.
and it worked for them, right? They got the security associated with Citrix. They got it to leverage the ICA protocol, and then they got a chance to use the VMware Virtual Desktop, and it worked really well. Of course, they were paying for both licenses, but at the same time, it met the need, and it was something they were familiar with and they could leverage.
Well, Todd, think about it though. What was not unusual is those were two different budgets. You had application delivery coming from the app team, and then you had the desktops coming from an entirely different team. So,
yep.
Yeah, Geremy, actually, it's one of our mutual customers that we both would know real well if I said the acronym. That was one of these conversations last week. And if I had time in every meeting, I would just stop and say, okay, stop, whether you're new or old to this. And I've got what I've got on the screen. What is Citrix used for? Installed on user devices and other endpoints, such as virtual desktops. Workspace app provides users a quick, secure, self-service access to documents, applications of all types, if I could add that little piece, and desktops. And then it goes on to talk about, on-demand access to web apps, SaaS apps, x86 apps. If you can just get everybody to agree that's what Citrix is, then you can have a real conversation. If you can't get past that and it's all about a published app from Windows, you're probably not going to get very far. Hey, what are we here to talk about?
I think we got a new version of a product that came out 3 months ago. We're still on this block.
All right. So this is part 4 of the What's New in 2209 and DaaS. Guys, where did we leave off?
All right. We've talked about MSIX.
Yep.
We have talked about hypervisor. We've talked about SAML-based auth. I think where we're at is right there, actually. Active Directory with connector appliances.
All right, so other new features in DaaS, so Citrix Desktop as a Service, where it comes from the magic of the clouds, and Andy likes to call this plural, not singular. Active Directory with connector appliances. I think this is something I've wanted for a long time. Geremy, go ahead and tell me what this is.
I mean, this is a big deal. Listen, if you have one domain in a cloud, or it honestly doesn't matter where it's at, right? But if you're trying to connect a resource location, you got one domain, this is not a real big deal. But most organizations I bump into, they have a forest with multiple domains. And the idea is if you want users to be able to log in against any of those domains, you had to put cloud connectors in every single one of those domains, even if they were in the same location. And so what this does...
Define for me real quick what a cloud connector is.
So Cloud Connector, wow, man, so many roles. In fact, if you install this software on a Windows machine, I think there's maybe 20 different services that get installed. But long story short, if you're running Citrix DaaS,
sorry, Geremy, just real quick. So, but it starts as a Windows domain joined yet another Windows server or 3, right?
Correct, right? So your DaaS solution, you've got resources sitting in a location. You need to install these Windows Cloud Connectors. At least 2, probably 3 from a redundancy perspective. In this location, they are domain joined, so they're domain aware. And once that happens, then Workspace knows how to log in, is essentially what it is. And the way it works in the past is if you had multiple domains, that meant you had to stand up multiple pairs, 2s and 3s of cloud connectors, Windows Cloud Connectors in each of these locations. And so what this does is, number one, this is a connector appliance, so this is a virtual appliance. And number one, it's not Windows. And number 2, it's also forest aware. So now, you could put one of these guys in, or a pair of these guys in, and it can traverse your forest a little bit. So you don't need 2 connectors at least per domain, which is a really big deal, especially in a cloud where every resource means more money.
So it's a smart edge, right? Smarter, leaner, thinner edge. Quick question for you. Like historically, I had one set, which could be 2, maybe 3 N+1 per domain, and maybe I could do a trust somewhere behind that. I don't know. But now it's just at least 2, maybe 3 N+1 appliances that can talk to all my different domains, trust, no trust, forest, no forest, right?
That is correct. That's correct.
Real quick
So what's
question.
interesting about this, and I'm going to say no to your next question, because usually the next question that comes up is, does this replace the Windows Cloud Connectors? And that is not true. So
Interesting.
yeah, so this, I think the end goal eventually will be to migrate all of the services over to this connector appliance. But today, there's just a lot to move over. I mean, you've got local host cache, you've got essentially for your on-prem VDAs, it appears to be a DDC. So there's a lot that needs to be ported over to this new appliance whenever that makes it. So Not quite there yet. This is specifically focused on authentication. But this connector appliance is also the same appliance you would use with secure private access, where you're trying to provide internal access to or external access to internal web apps. So that would proxy through the same appliance as well.
I feel like that time at Christmas when I got Nintendo games and no Nintendo box to play them on.
This is not the ET that came with the Atari 2600, which was just frustrating. This is certainly a step forward, but just to set some expectations, it's not replacing the Windows connectors yet.
Todd, if I have one of these and I'm using it for the Active Directory portion, is Citrix now going to also update the Linux or just the software for the connector?
Sure, it's on the roadmap. It's going to, it's a Windows first type approach.
Yeah. Well, and I started to set this whole thing up with, those connectors are somewhat magical anyway. We should probably do another podcast. I think we did one in the past about all the different services on those. Bill, how does this change your rollouts?
At this time, not much, unless, when we have SPA conversations or SPA deployments, which we've had very few of up to this point, then this would definitely be something that would be part of the conversation. Obviously, if or when we get to the point where this essentially takes the role of the traditional connector that we use with Citrix DaaS, then yes, this would mean we wouldn't have to worry about Windows operating system installation and maintenance of the connector itself. So certainly it would change the conversation with the customer and probably make the deployment a little quicker.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, before I forget, this blog is by Heather Tatt. I don't think I said that earlier. She does great work, and make sure she gets recognized for us just hanging out talking about the blog she put together. She did all this for us. We just talked about it. Todd, I'll go to you this next one. Non-cloud admin email notifications. Help us, give us a little background here, and then tell us what this new thing means.
Yes. So this is a great feature, and I'm putting my admin hat on because oftentimes you would have to get you would get notifications from your Citrix environment. You would go to the admin only email distribution list, right? So or whoever you identified to get the email notifications sent out to, right? So instead of having to grant everyone admin level access just to get a notification, this feature allows you to identify individual designations or destinations for notifications, for service alerts and things like that. Sometimes they're within IT, but other times they may not be within IT. An example would be if your audit team needs to have, number of unique login information or number of failed logins, just as a way to kind of trigger or some type of reporting for the audit team. Or what if I could actually route a application error or an application specific information over to the application owner instead of having to go to the admin who then has to forward it out. And I look back and think, at another point in my career, that we used to have to be done by creating all type of complex email routing rules and things like that to get, the error that's coming in on an SAP launch to go to the SAP admin team or the SAP performance management team. What this does is it helps solve that problem and allow us to actually kind of do some intelligent routing of that operational information.
Bill, any situations where that would have been useful for our clients where they've asked for that?
Yes. Particularly help desk type folks, they'll get like access to what we've historically called Director. It's now the Monitor tab within the DaaS console, but for DaaS customers. But I think really what this is talking about, correct me if I'm wrong, Todd, are these are cloud notifications. So these are things like there's an issue with cloud, or we want to make you aware of this change or what have you, and those sorts of things or have always gone to admins. Probably aren't appropriate for help desk, but maybe appropriate for other lines of business. So yeah, we've had like to allow these notifications to go to perhaps an alias or something along those lines. We've had those requests in the past, and this certainly will help us address them.
Hey, Bill, I'm going to come to you for the next two. First one we'll hit real quick. Improved search in Citrix DaaS Web Studio, which, big kudos to Citrix. This whole studio thing has been more and more web enabled over the last 3 or 4 years, or 3 years. Huge improvements there. Bill, any comments to be made on the search piece?
Yeah, I mean, it basically what it said, improved search, and this is really within the DaaS Web Studio console. Is there's now a search button that you can use, and they've improved it. Well, it's actually been there a while, but they've improved it so particularly when you've got large environments that have perhaps multiple machine catalogs, multiple delivery groups, multiple VMs running within those, and the ability to quickly find them within Studio. And then the capability of being able to export the results as a CSV file, as well as some advanced filtering, certainly will help admins in those larger and even smaller environments get the kind of data they need out of the console.
Okay, I was hoping you'd hurry through that because I want to get to this next one.
I know you do. I knew you did.
Session recording service preview. Bill and I are big fans of Smart Auditor. Todd, you know what Smart Auditor is?
Oh yeah.
So
back in the day.
That's like Andy dropping Metaframe right there. And let's go old school with our terms.
Guys, you can maybe just think of something. I check the podcast every so often to make sure they're in line, and I go back and listen to them a little bit. We did the one from last week or 2 weeks ago when we did this last time, and I literally listened to the whole thing before I realized I had listened to it. I was so intrigued by what we were talking about. I don't know what that says about me, but nonetheless. Session recording. Geremy, session recording used to be called Smart Auditor. Now it's session recording service in Tech Preview. Have people been clamoring for this?
So I'll tell you, we've got some customers who certainly they're interested in leveraging this, right? So they're running session recording as an entire deployment stack on-prem in a resource location. And the idea here is, can we offload some of the management into the cloud? Now, as cool as that is, right? So, keeping the actual recording targets, on-prem, but keeping the management stack in the cloud, very similar to the way DaaS works. What's cool about this is it actually integrates even better with like the analytics service, right? So just a quicker tie-in. So now you've got event-driven, session recording pieces, but ultimately it's just easier to stand this up. And one of the new things they've tied into here is making it backwards compatible with older versions of code, 1912 LTSR. Sorry, friends, not 715, but at least 1912.
So when I first saw this earlier, I was thinking it was going to be this ability to put the data up in the cloud more seamlessly. This is the control plane piece. Any foreshadowing on the ability maybe to take this and tie it into some public cloud storage to overcome that thing you hear every time you bring this up, that it's going to be a lot of data?
Not yet, but that would certainly be advantageous for sure. We're starting to see this in other solutions, right? Being able to leverage things like Azure Files as opposed to standing up an SMB share for just certain kinds of storage profile data, things like that. So, I see a scenario where you could do that with session recording. So that'd be nice.
To help people understand, what are we actually capturing whenever we're doing session recording? Like, what's the comeback to the fact that it's going to be a lot of data? What makes it so it's not a lot of data?
So part of it is there's a certain amount of compression that goes into this, depending on whether you're doing the app or the entire desktop. You can get some improvements around, not having to take up an entire full video recording. So that's probably first and foremost. And the session recording that we introduced with the application. Think about it back in the Smart Auditor days. It was just within the application window itself, and then people started saying, well, we need to do the entire desktop itself to kind of see what else is going on. And the storage requirements for that just went through the roof. So we have to come up with ways of compressing that data or compressing those video images. It's still, depending on what you're recording, can still consume a pretty decent amount of storage. But capabilities like that we've introduced as far as this offering is being able to auto delete and also add in their auto archiving. So being able to clean up that storage and clean up the amount of data that's sitting out there has been impressive and required.
But you hit on what I was trying to get to is, for the most part, you're just recording what's changed on the screen, which for most people's applications isn't that much.
Correct.
Go ahead,
That's
Geremy.
part of the compression.
Yeah, it's part of a big part of that. The other side of this too is I think folks who have deployed this will also have multiple sites of session recording running. And, the challenge has always been, you've got to log into separate sites. Here's my primary site, session recording service. Here's maybe my failover site, whatever. Now I'm standing it up in a cloud. What this also does is tie all three of those potential sites together into one view, which is huge.
Okay, next section, which is near and dear to my heart because we're heavily investing in a ServiceNow practice over here. Extend ITSM capabilities with Citrix ITSM adapter for ServiceNow. Before we go into this, I just want to, for my clarification, let me just ask the question. This is like, we're only talking about DaaS at this point. So if somebody really wants that tight integration with ServiceNow, that's going to happen in DaaS, not CVAD. Am I on the right path there, guys?
Yeah, that's a cloud service, the ITMS adapter.
Okay.
It only works with DaaS.
Which is fine. I mean, most people are moving there and maybe they're moving to ServiceNow, and it's just all the more reason to either adopt ServiceNow or adopt Citrix Cloud or both, which for the most part is every customer we have should be heading in that direction if they can figure out how to cost justify it, or maybe this is what cost justifies it for them, is getting that data where it needs to be in the integration there. So the first one says automatic deprovisioning of idle static desktops.
Well, let me take a step back here, Andy. So I will say this, just to clarify, it is a DaaS service. It's a cloud service, and you can tie this into an on-prem environment, but it requires things like site aggregation to do it. So again, you've got to be a cloud customer. Even if you haven't migrated your control plane up to the cloud to manage your VDAs, you can still do it, but it does require DaaS licensing to pull it off and site aggregation to pull it off.
Yeah.
So that's an important caveat.
So Todd, why does automatic deprovisioning of idle static desktops integration with ServiceNow, why is that important?
So it's really two things, right? So the first thing is there's the cost structure associated with, deprovisioning or more importantly, not deprovisioning. Those machines that are sitting up in Azure or GCP or any of the resource locations, once you've provisioned those, they sit there and they run or they sit dormant. The meter's still going on some of those. So there's a cost management component of it. But the other part of it is, you don't want to have those devices or those machines sitting up there, those virtual desktops or virtual applications sitting up there as a potential threat vector or an access point. So being able to automatically deprovision those services are absolutely critical.
So we are in the process of rolling out ServiceNow internally for our own use case for our companies, XenTegra. We're also going to be offering this to our clients as managed instances to drastically reduce the cost. And I was on board for sure. And then I said, at one point I said, okay, why is this so important for us internally? I get why we want to do it for customers to make money, right? But why is it so important for us internally? And one of my guys said, well, it's for security. I was like, what do you mean it's for security? ServiceNow is not for security. It's like, yeah, I mean, you can't patch and manage and maintain and protect things that you don't know exist. Therefore, let's get that into ServiceNow, our centralized repository. And from there, we can make intelligent decisions around lots of things, but security is paramount. I totally changed the way I looked at ServiceNow, ITSM specifically. And ITAM, by the way, asset management. All right, Geremy, next one is automatic approval of self-service app and desktop requests. Sounds like Nirvana, to be honest with you.
It does sound like Nirvana. I gotta be honest, Andy, like I don't have a view into ServiceNow from my vantage point. And so this is where I would love to maybe get a demo from you guys and some of your integrations, because I mean, listen, this is great. Any time that you can auto approve something within a certain just service level, right? I mean, I think it's a good idea. So self-service password reset, self-service, requests and things like that. I mean, I go into our service now as a user, it's Citrix, and it's kind of nice to be able to request things that get auto approved. So I don't know what makes me special or unspecial. Some of my requests are not terribly big, but the idea that I don't have to wait for IT to approve something or my manager to approve something to be able to get access, and maybe pair that up with automatic deprovisioning too. So let's go say I automatically get approved for a static desktop. Great. Guess what, Geremy? You don't use it for 15 days. Well, let's go deprovision it, right? I mean, I just think there's a lot of, like you said, nirvana in a workflow like this. This sounds great.
I'm super excited to talk to my team about how to get the our implementation.
Yep.
Powerful demos. If we can make these just part of our instances that become part of our customer instances as we roll them out.
Mm-hmm.
So Bill, next one is custom workflow for handling employee separation. I didn't know what that meant until I read it out loud. Now I think I do. Tell me why you think this matters.
Well, we've been seeing a lot of this, unfortunately, lately with folks that are working for certain companies who will go unnamed, all of a sudden trying to log in one morning and finding out they've been effectively deprovisioned. I suspect in a lot of these organizations, that's a manual process where someone literally has to go in and log them off, literally has to go into a separate system, deprovision their VDIs, and then go into the same system into the groups section and remove them from the groups. What this does, as I understand it, is automates all of that. So when an employee leaves of their own accord on their last day, this workflow kicks off and does the things it says. It deprovisions them from their VDIs, logs them out if they happen to be logged in, and removes them from selected groups. In the event that they are terminated or leave involuntarily, you can do this much more quickly. Of course, one thing that's not mentioned here, but that almost goes with all of these, is that typically these workflows, they aren't quote unquote necessarily automatic. You can make them automatic, but many of them, like this one, would probably go through an approval process at various layers that someone would have to say, yes, we want to deprovision on this day, or we want to run this workflow to handle separation on a certain day and time. So when you think about this historically, companies would onboard folks through a manual process, and then when they left of their own accord, their accounts, I mean, I don't know how many times back in the day when I'd go out and look at a customer's environment and I'd open up Active Directory and I'd see how many employees do you have? Oh, we have 35 attorneys and 25 paralegals. Okay, that's 60 people. You've got 92 accounts in Active Directory. Oh, really? Yeah. Well, what about this guy? Oh, he left 2 years ago. That kind of stuff, I'm sure, still happens.
It happens a lot, actually. Yeah, happens a lot.
And as a former security auditor, I used to love going in and do Active Directory sweeps because you would find accounts that were dormant, that they took away their access, but they still had the active application account associated with it.
Right.
And a variety of different things. And it was really just the process to go through and turn off individual application access and reroute data ownership from one employee to another, reroute email. I mean, it was a 4 or 5 page document that was a checklist for the help desk or the user administration team to have to go through. And if you do it at scale, something is always going to get missing. Something's always going to get missed. Or you have those intentional bad actors that are out there that take advantage of those type of things.
Right.
Hey, I don't need to get in through the front door, but I have a credential that allows me to get in through the back door someplace.
And then you've got the situation where you've got the employee who started with the company in finance and then decided he wanted to be a sales guy, and then decided he wanted to be an operations person or some other role on the factory floor, but their account is still a member of the finance group and has access to all the financial information. That's unfortunately, I think, probably still very common. And although this specific article doesn't touch on that, that's something else that you can leverage ServiceNow workflows to accomplish.
Todd, if they had a written out workflow, true or false, it was out of date the day after they wrote it.
Oh yeah.
Typically, yeah.
Yep.
That's even worse when you think you have something that covers you and you don't.
Right.
All right, let's see, 4th bullet here, ability to import Citrix DaaS license information into ServiceNow. Geremy, I have to assume that your customers would love to have high-level visibility into that from a centralized system.
Yeah, of course, right. Just to be able to bubble up that information makes it either A, to know how your usage is, and B, just I mean, listen, it's just context switching here. I don't have to go back and forth and chase this information down. So if I'm provisioning, deprovisioning from, ServiceNow, then why not put that front and center? Makes sense.
I bet we have one customer a week that oversubscribes their Citrix licenses, and the Citrix admin may or may not notice if they were checking their notifications. But when we tell them, then they know. But the organization, I bet, had no idea that this is happening, and it could be happening a lot.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Not just that, but there's a feature inside this new HDX for Microsoft, 365, where within the Citrix console, you can actually check out licenses from M365 and make sure folks get assigned. So I think the idea of sharing this information and just making it seamless to where I can do this from one portal, if you will, and I have to go back and forth. I have the visibility. Plus, I can kind of assign licenses from one spot too.
Last one here says enhanced policy settings for Citrix DaaS identifications. Todd, you want to take it?
Yeah. So this is something that's been on the nice to have list for probably the past 4 or 5 years, and that is, I want to be able to select what notifications are critical, what ones are informational, or what ones are purely just system generated messages that need to be, it's a requirement that they have to be generated because something happened. I want to be able to, as an administrator, I want to be able to assign some priorities and assign some automated routing in there. And that's kind of what the enhanced policies do. Gives us the ability to identify, and route things that are absolutely critical that we have to act on, and also kind of not have to look through every single message or notification for something that's just just nice to have, or something that's for information purposes only.
You want to drown out the noise, appropriately handle the noise, and get deep when you need to. Yeah, one quick marketing plug for XenTegra. We are working really hard on our ServiceNow practice in conjunction to our existing line of business, which is digital workspace. Citrix is a big part of that. That's where we're going. If you're listening to this and you've got ServiceNow and you've got Citrix and you haven't tied the two together and you want help, give us a call, because we're going to go after that business in a big way. And for Todd and Geremy, you have your sales engineers out there. If they're running into ServiceNow, which they will if they just ask. If you just ask about it, it's everywhere. We're the partner to help you. All right, last section here talks about enhancing Windows environment management service. I must have 3 meetings a week where it comes up, user performance, user high fidelity experience. Users are important, and Citrix has really invested heavily in the workspace environment management side of the business. Let's go through these somewhat quick. Run out of time here, but support for performing administrative tasks. Bill, you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. So, like you said, workspace environment management, or the WEM service, it's something we're seeing in just about every engagement now, every consulting engagement. A lot of customers are looking to this, at least initially, for the enhancements to memory and CPU management, but also for a lot of putting icons on the desktop and setting up printers and a lot of other things in the same place. So this first bullet, support for performing admin tasks for non-domain joined and enrolled agents. This is really just allowing them to extend to those devices that are not joined to the standard Active Directory domain. And then enrolled agents would be, again, those that are not part of the AD domain that have connected to the environment, and you can invite users to enroll, which is discussed a little bit further down in this section.
I had AppSense and Res both came up last week, and WIM has come so far that I had to actually stop and remind myself what those were. Todd, next one says configuring Windows GPOs by group policy administrative templates preview. What is that?
Yeah, so this is obviously it's a preview right now, but the ability to kind of keep a catalog of your group policy templates that are out there and apply your GPOs. So being able to have, if I have a catalog of my GPOs or my administrative templates, there's a lot less likelihood that I'm going to implement GPOs that step on each other. And I look back at, a lot of the problems with employee performance, or not employee performance, but user performance, is oftentimes related to, when you look at the group policies that are applicable to that user, a lot of them contradict each other, or they're looking to do a printer mapping, or they're looking to do a file mapping, or they're looking to do something. And then further on down the GPO stack, there's another process that kicks off. What this is trying to do is help administrators kind of organize their GPOs a little bit better by creating a formal way to do these templates.
Yeah, GPOs and Windows and whoever the person was that started them, and then the person inherited them, and then the next person inherited them. I mean, to use the phrase shit show, it's pretty much usually a shit show.
Yeah, there used to be a product out there years and years and years ago that was basically, it was a GPO search tool that you could go and compare. You take a GPO and it would look at your entire GPO stack, and then be able to say, hey, you know what, these three additional policies contradict or repeat what you're currently trying to do with this. It's a great tool. I thought it was something that was going to be very valuable. I was kind of shocked that nobody had kind of picked it up. But it really comes down to, you go through cycles of administrators, and everyone comes in and tries to do something different. And shame on the operating system manufacturers for allowing stuff like that to happen. Nobody goes through and cleans up registries. Nobody goes through and cleans up, go back to the autoexec.bat file days where, you would go through there every once in a while, or you would add things in and never have to go clean them up afterwards. So this really helps that.
TS login script. Oh my gosh. I believe I even thought about that. Bill, when you walk into a new project and the customer says, oh, we'll just use my existing GPOs, what's your reaction?
Oh, no, we'd like to review them first.
Oh, hell no. Wait, never. Not unless you force me to. Oh my gosh. All right, last two, Jeremy, knock both of these out since we're out of time. Invite users to enroll agents, preview.
So there's an enrollment node inside of WIM now. You can send invites to users. They can enroll up to 5 devices, actually. Would be a good use case for non-domain joined, machines. We say VDAs also work on an endpoint too. Right. But that's also supported. And then scripted tasks. This is pretty slick. So if you've got a scripted task you'd like to kick off, you can do it. Basically throw some criteria around it. Maybe it's a Windows event. Maybe it's a profile management issue. Maybe it's a VDA issue. But you could have it looking for certain scenarios, and should something happen, scripted tasks, they could do it automatically, reboot something, restart a service, something like that.
I don't know about you guys, but I feel like I just ran a 5K and I finally crossed the finish line. Maybe a marathon.
5K, marathon's probably maybe an ultra.
I would love to talk to you guys about what your Thanksgiving week looks like, but I've got to run to the next meeting. But guys, this has been great. I think we covered a lot of stuff, and hopefully people appreciate it. We had a little fun. I love having these conversations, and it keeps me up to date on what's going on. There's, we're 25, 30 years into this, and there's still stuff happening and evolving all the time. Thank you for doing this.
Oh, this
happy
is great.
Thanksgiving.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving, guys.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Do it again in a week. See you.
Yep.
See ya.
Take care.